backyard at the library. We're going to enjoy picnic story time. I've got a couple great books before we enjoy our picnic. Thought we'd start with Harold and the Purple Crayon. One evening, after thinking it over for some time, Harold decided to go for a walk in the moonlight. There wasn't any moon, and Harold needed a moon for a walk in the moonlight. And he needed something to walk on. He made a long, straight path so he wouldn't get lost. And he set off on his walk, taking his big purple crayon with him. But he didn't seem to be getting anywhere on the long, straight path. So he left the path for a shortcut across a field, and the moon went with him. The shortcut led right to where Harold thought a forest ought to be. He didn't want to get lost in the woods, so he made a very small forest with just one tree in it. It turned out to be an apple tree. The apples would be very tasty, Harold thought, when they got red. So he put a frightening dragon under the tree to guard the apples. It was a terribly frightening dragon. It even frightened Harold. He backed away. His hand holding the purple crayon shook. Suddenly he realized what was happening. But by then, Harold was over his head in an ocean. He came up thinking fast, and in no time he was climbing aboard a trim little boat. He quickly set sail, and the moon sailed along with him. After he had sailed long enough, Harold had made land without much trouble. He stepped ashore on the beach, wondering where he was. The sandy beach reminded Harold of picnics, and the thought of picnics made him hungry. So he laid out a nice, simple picnic lunch. There was nothing but pie, but there were all 9 kinds of pie that Harold liked best. When Harold finished his picnic, there was quite a lot left over. He hated to see so much delicious pie go to waste. So Harold left a very hungry moose and a deserving porcupine to finish it all up. And off he went, looking for a hill to climb, to see where he was. Harold knew that the higher up he went, the further he could see, so he decided to make a hill into a mountain. If he went high enough, he thought he could see the window of his bedroom. He was tired and he felt he ought to be getting to bed. He hoped he could see his bedroom window from the top of the mountain. But as he looked down over the other side, he slipped, and there wasn't any other side of the mountain. He was falling in thin air. But luckily, he kept his wits and his purple crayon. He made a balloon, and he grabbed onto it. And he made a basket under the balloon big enough to stand in. He had a fine view from the balloon, but he couldn't see his window, and he couldn't even see a house. So he made a house with windows, and he landed the balloon on the grass in the front yard. None of the windows was his window. He tried to think where his window ought to be. He made some more windows. He made a big building full of windows. He made lots of buildings full of windows. He made a whole city full of windows. But none of the windows was his window, and he couldn't think where it might be. he decided to ask a policeman. The policeman pointed the way Harold was going anyway, but Harold thanked him. And he walked along with the moon, wishing he was in his room and in bed. Then suddenly, Harold remembered. He remembered where his bedroom window was when there was a moon. It was always right around the moon. And then Harold made his bed, and he got in, and he drew up the covers. The purple crayon dropped on the floor, and Harold dropped off to sleep. The next story we're going to read, Caps for Sale. Once there was a peddler who sold caps, but he was not like any ordinary peddler carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on top of his head. First, he had on his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, and on the very top, a bunch of red caps. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight so as not to upset his caps. As he went along, he called, "Caps! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" One morning, he couldn't sell any caps. He walked up the street and he walked down the street calling, "Caps! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" Nobody wanted any caps that morning. Nobody wanted even a red cap. He began to feel very hungry, but he had no money for lunch. "I think I'll go for a walk in the country," he said. And he walked out of town, slowly, slowly, so as not to upset his caps. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. "That's a nice place for a rest," he thought. And he sat down very slowly under the tree and leaned back a little by little against the tree trunk so as not to disturb the caps on his head. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. They were all there, so he went to sleep. He slept for a long time. When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, he felt with his hand to make sure his caps were in the right place. All he felt was his own checked cap. He looked on the right of him, no caps. He looked on the left of him, no caps. He looked in the back of him, no caps. He looked behind the tree, no caps. Then he looked into the tree, and what do you think he saw? On every branch sat a monkey. On every monkey was a gray, or a brown, or a blue, or a red cap. The peddler looked at the monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them. "You monkeys, you," he said, shaking a finger at them, "you give me back my caps." The monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, "Tsk, tsk, tsk." This made the peddler angry, so he shook both hands at them and said, "You monkeys, you give back my caps." But the monkeys only shook their hands back at him and said, "Tsk, tsk, tsk, tsk." Now he felt quite angry. He stomped his feet and he said, "You monkeys, you better give me back my caps." The monkeys only stomped their feet back at him and said, "Tsk, tsk, 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 tsk." By the time the peddler was really very, very angry, he stomped both his feet and shouted, "You monkeys, you must give me back my caps." The monkeys only stomped both their feet back at him and said, "Tsk, tsk, 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 tsk." At last he became so angry that he pulled off his cap and threw it on the ground and began to walk away. But then each monkey pulled off his cap. And all the gray caps, and all the brown caps, and all the blue caps, and all the red caps came flying down out of the tree. So the peddler picked up his caps and put them back on his head. First, his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. And slowly, slowly, he walked back to town calling, "Caps! Caps for sale, 50 cents a cap!" And that's the end. So before our picnic, we read Harold and the Purple Crayon and Caps for Sale. Enjoy your picnic. I'm going to have a banana for my picnic.